Kendra Hayes handed over her license and registration without flinching. Her calm demeanor masked years of navigating difficult situations, a skill she'd perfected in a world where respect wasn't freely given to black women, especially in positions of authority. The senior officer glanced over the documents, his brow furrowing when he saw the name. "Chief of Police?" he muttered, unable to hide his disbelief. The younger officer shifted uneasily, a flicker of recognition passing over his face as he glanced at Kendra again. He had clearly heard the rumors about the department's new leader, but hadn't expected to meet her like this. "What's the issue here, officers?" Kendra asked, her tone steady, though every word carried weight. The older officer hesitated, clearly caught between the lines of habit and uncertainty. "Routine stop," he finally managed, though his voice faltered slightly. Routine, Kendra thought. Riley. Isn't that what they always called it when power was abused under the guise of procedure? Her eyes scanned their body language, tension, unease, and an unmistakable hint of defensiveness. Years of experience had taught her to read these signs. She knew this wasn't about a traffic violation. This was about authority, and they hadn't expected to find it sitting behind the wheel of her car. "I appreciate you doing your jobs," Kendra said, "but today isn't the day for games." She leaned forward just enough to meet their eyes. "Today is about change." The senior officer stiffened. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by a black woman in Cedar View. His authority had always gone unquestioned, but this was different. "You'll want to run those credentials," Kendra suggested calmly, nodding toward the ID in his hand. "And when you're done, we'll have a conversation about what it means to serve everyone in this community." Silence stretched between them, the weight of history pressing down on the roadside scene. The younger officer shifted again, clearly struggling with the realization that they had just pulled over their new boss. Kendra's gaze didn't waver. Cedar View had a history, but she was here to write a new chapter, one where bias wouldn't rule the streets. The senior officer finally nodded, curtly returning her documents. His voice was quieter now, less sure. "Welcome to Cedar View, Chief." Kendra smiled faintly. "Thank you, officer. I look forward to working with you both." As they walked back to their vehicle, Kendra knew this encounter was only the beginning. But she wasn't here to merely hold a title. She was here to lead by example and break down the walls that had stood for far too long. The patrol car's lights flicked off, and as Kendra pulled back onto the road, she felt the shift in the air, a subtle but powerful reminder that change had come to Cedar View, and it wasn't going anywhere. Kendra Hayes remained calm, though the tension weighed heavily on the morning air. Years of experience had taught her that moments like this could define not only relationships, but entire perceptions of authority and respect. The senior officer's face flushed with embarrassment, his earlier confidence unraveling as he realized who he had been addressing. The younger officer, his bravado completely stripped away, stared at the ground, clearly regretting his choice of words. "A misunderstanding?" Kendra echoed, her voice even but cutting. "No, officer. What just happened here is precisely the problem Cedar View has been ignoring for far too long." The senior officer opened his mouth to respond, but Kendra held up a hand, commanding silence. "I was polite. I complied with every request," she continued. "Yet I was met with suspicion, condescension, and an unnecessary reminder of who holds power here. And why? Because I'm a black woman driving into town." The words hung heavy in the air. The officers had no response because there was none that could justify their behavior. "Let me be clear," Kendra said, stepping out of her vehicle and facing them directly. "This department will no longer be a place where bias goes unchecked. Cedar View deserves better, and starting today, that's exactly what it's going to get." The officers exchanged uneasy glances, clearly aware that this encounter would be etched into their memories for a long time. The senior officer finally spoke, his tone subdued. "Chief Hayes, we apologize for the way this played out." Kendra's eyes softened, but only slightly. "Apologies are a start," she said, "but actions matter more. If you're serious about serving this town, it's time to rethink how you engage with its people. All its people." The officers nodded, humbled and visibly shaken. Kendra took a step back, signaling that the conversation was over. "You're dismissed," she said firmly, reclaiming her authority. They returned to their patrol car without another word, and Kendra watched as they drove off, their taillights fading into the distance. As she got back into her car and resumed her drive into town, she reflected on the encounter. It wasn't the first time she'd faced racism, and it likely wouldn't be the last. But this time was different. She was in a position to make real change, to challenge the system from within and ensure that respect and justice were no longer privileges but rights for everyone in Cedar View. The road stretched ahead, wide and open. It was symbolic of the journey she was embarking on, a path that wouldn't be easy but was necessary, and Kendra Hayes was ready for it. Kendra Hayes stood firm, her voice steady but unyielding. "No, this isn't a misunderstanding," she repeated. "It's a pattern. A pattern where you stop people like me without cause, make assumptions, and try to throw your authority around because you think no one will hold you accountable." The senior officer's lips parted, but no sound came out. He knew there was no defense, no justification that could stand against the truth she had laid bare. Kendra's unwavering stance only magnified their guilt. Her gaze bore into them. "This is exactly why the community doesn't trust the system, and it's exactly why I'm here, to change it." Silence enveloped the scene, broken only by the faint rustling of the wind. Both officers stood rigid, the weight of her words sinking in. "This isn't just about me," Kendra said, stepping closer, her tone resolute. "It's about every person who's been stopped, harassed, or made to feel less than simply because they didn't fit someone's narrow idea of belonging." She paused, letting her words linger. Then, with measured confidence, she issued her directive. "For the next few weeks, you'll be reporting directly to me. I'll personally review every traffic stop you make. So I suggest you think long and hard about how you conduct yourselves moving forward." The senior officer cleared his throat, his voice faltering. "Chief Hayes, we didn't mean any disrespect. It won't happen again." Kendra gave a slight nod, though skepticism clouded her expression. "Good," she replied softly. But deep down, she knew better. These two might think twice before making the same mistake, but systemic problems ran deeper than a single encounter. That was the very reason she'd taken this position, to uproot the prejudice that had festered for too long within the Cedar View Police Department. As she returned to her car and pulled back onto the road, Kendra allowed herself a steadying breath. Victory was small in moments like these, but it mattered. Today she'd set the tone. Tomorrow there would be new challenges, new battles to fight. Later that afternoon, Kendra stood at the front of the department's meeting room, surveying the officers gathered before her. The room was thick with tension, some faces hostile, others wary. She straightened her posture and met their gazes head-on. "I'm not here to blend in," she declared. "I'm here to change how this department operates. Fairness and respect aren't optional, they're non-negotiable." Her words echoed through the room, carrying the weight of her conviction. This is the start of something new, and whether you like it or not, we're doing this the right way from now on. A few heads nodded reluctantly, others stared back defiantly. But Kendra Hayes didn't need their immediate approval, she needed results. Kendra Hayes stood tall before the room of officers, her voice cutting through the heavy atmosphere. "This morning was a lesson," she began, her tone calm but resolute. A lesson in accountability, respect, and the kind of behavior that ends today. Silence gripped the room. No one dared interrupt as she recounted the details of the morning encounter with the two officers, sparing nothing. "I'm not here to shame anyone," Kendra continued, locking eyes with the crowd, "but I am here to ensure that this department treats every resident of Cedar View with fairness, dignity, and respect, regardless of their race, gender, or background. That's non-negotiable." A murmur rippled through the room, a mix of unease and defiance. Kendra was no stranger to this reaction. Change was always met with resistance, but that had never stopped her before. "This is your opportunity to prove you're the kind of officers this community can trust," she said. "But make no mistake, bias, disrespect, and abuse of authority will not be tolerated. Those who think they're above the law have no place here." The weight of her words hung in the air. Some officers shifted in their seats, avoiding her gaze, while others nodded quietly, their expressions thoughtful. Kendra could tell who was ready to stand with her and who was resistant, but she wasn't here to win a popularity contest. She was here to lead. Over the coming weeks, the story of her encounter spread throughout Cedar View. For some in the community, it was a sign that real change was finally coming. For others, it was a stark reminder that they could no longer turn a blind eye to injustice. The media picked up the story, casting Kendra as a symbol of reform, a leader unafraid to confront the issues that had plagued Cedar View for years. Cameras captured her unwavering presence, headlines praised her determination, but Kendra stayed focused. Symbolism wasn't enough. Actions mattered more. Scrutiny became a constant companion. Every traffic stop, every encounter, and every decision was watched closely. Kendra welcomed it. She hadn't fought this hard to shrink away from accountability. Now. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Kendra drove through the streets of Cedar View, her thoughts steady despite the challenges ahead. The road to justice was long and winding, but she was ready for the journey. She knew there would be more battles, more moments when her resolve would be tested. But Cedar View needed change, and she was exactly where she was meant to be, leading that change with strength, resilience, and a commitment to justice that wouldn't waver.